But you're in these little neighborhoods with these houses that are $1 million a piece, and right behind them, on the other side of the cul-de-sac, is literally mountain cows on the side of a mountain. Hey guys, welcome back to Wayward Stories, the podcast where we tell our stories of self discovery and adventure in the great outdoors. I'm super psyched that you came back to listen to episode 2 as we continue to try to get this juggernaut rolling. Well, that's probably a mischaracterization, isn't it? It's not a juggernaut until it's like this huge, unstoppable machine. We're not quite there. This could easily be stopped at a moment's notice. Um, but I'm glad that you're back. I'm glad that you're going along for the ride with me. In our last episode, we were kind of setting up and starting to roll into my story of self discovery, so that we can kind of build the platform and the idea for everyone else to look at and glean from as how they want to share their stories with the show. Again, if you want to share your stories, it's mywaywardstory@gmail.com. Send those stories in, guys. We're going to need them because we're going to start rolling on this thing and churning out episodes. But let's get back to my story. Let's just kind of get moving right out of the box here and get this episode in the can and keep on trucking. So in the last episode, we wrapped up with me in Williams, Arizona on Christmas Day in the snow, eating my bagged fast food dinner. And it was a beautiful, glorious moment for me. But now we're going to pick up this episode and we're going to make the last leg of the trip on to San Francisco, on to my new adventure where I was going to spend roughly 10 weeks out of the next 14 of my life, 2.5 solid months out there. It was broke up in the middle by a break to come home for a month. But I got 2.5 months out there on the Central California coast, and I've loved these abilities, these opportunities I've had in the last couple of years to travel for work for those contingencies, because they usually last a month at a time. And you really get the opportunity to really learn an area, to get to know people. You literally live there, but in the broader sense of living somewhere, you kind of get to settle into the area and really get a feel for things. And I love that. I love experiencing. There are so many tiny subcultures within the United States. We really truly are a melting pot. And there are all these little subcultures in different parts of the country. And it's so cool from a sociological perspective for me to be able to kind of go experience that, see what's going on there. So this was a great opportunity. So anyway, we get up day after Christmas and head off on the last leg of my trip to San Francisco. There are so many cool things, guys, going on in the desert Southwest. Number one, it's just beautiful. Mesas, the bright red rocks, the different shades of maroons and reds, and even into purples, like in the Painted Desert. That's something I did on my second return trip, was drive through the Painted Desert. It's like a 27, 28 mile little loop through the Painted Desert. That was amazing. That was one of the, man, I'm going to say one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen so many times in these first few episodes, because really that whole trip was filled with most beautiful things I've ever seen. But it was gorgeous. It was absolutely beautiful. Super cool. And if you're ever, and it's so easy, it's literally right off of I-40. Like you hit an exit and bam, there's the gate. There's the entrance. It's like hitting the Love's travel stop. So if you're ever traveling cross country in the Southwest on 40, you need to work Petrified National Forest in the Painted Desert into your agenda for the day. Give yourself a couple of extra hours. You don't even have to get out and walk. I mean, we are a pretty lazy country these days. If you really don't even want to walk, just go experience it. It's beautiful. But there's so many things to check out there in the desert. Went up to Hoover Dam, just made a detour just to see Hoover Dam. It was cool. Drove down the Vegas Strip just to say I did. That was a mistake. I wish I had not done that because I didn't get out and experience Vegas. I didn't go into a casino. I just wanted to drive down the strip. I had a pretty tight time frame and other things that I deemed more important to explore along the way. But it was neat. It was really cool to see Vegas in person. But ultimately it's a nightmare traffic situation and just wasted like 4 hours, or not quite that much, maybe 3 hours. It was terrible, but it was pretty cool. But went up, saw the Hoover Dam. That was cool. Came back down through the Mojave Desert, and saw one of the solar farms, which any of you guys play video games out there, played Fallout New Vegas. That was a huge game I played a lot. It was crazy to see an actual solar farm in situ because they play a role in that game. And I remember I actually put out there on Facebook, I had taken a screenshot from the game of the solar farm in game and put it next to the picture I took of that solar farm. Identical. Like, I mean, they clearly 3D modeled it after one of those sites. It was very cool. But there was a lot going on. You're following more or less, for the most part, the original route of Route 66. There are a lot of abandoned towns, a lot of abandoned buildings to check out along the way. Um, if you keep your eyes on and watch for signs, there are sections of 66 that you can drive and that still are extant. They are still there in place. And I found a really good one, and I had prepared to take this particular detour purposefully the night before. I'd been researching, trying to decide, because I'd been looking mindfully for a section of Route 66 that I could travel that would have some interesting stuff on it. So I identified, because I'm there in Williams. It's not very far before you hit Kingman, Arizona, and right before you get into California. And there is a section of 66 when you leave Kingman headed west, and it goes up, it goes over this mountain pass. It's about a 28-mile, or maybe it's 31-mile loop that kind of just veers off of 40. It's old 66. And it goes up through this mountain pass through a small town called Oatman, and then comes back down and basically terminates back in Interstate 40 in Needles, California. So I was like, okay, I'm totally doing this. Let me tell you guys something. There is nothing like sunrise in the desert. That was so shocking to me. I don't know why it's shocking, but it's absolutely breathtaking. Sunrise in the desert, sun's coming up over these mesas, these low mesas on the horizon. You've got all this desert scrub, you've got cacti, you've got, everything that is stereotypically known, the desert is stereotypically known for. But it's absolutely gorgeous. Like, I pulled over at one point. I was on 66. I had hit Kingman and was cruising out old 66 towards the mountain where the pass was going to be in just a little while, right about the time the sun started to come over the horizon. And I just pulled over and stopped and literally just sat there on the side of old 66. There wasn't a car for miles, and just watched the sunrise. It was an experience to be had. I'm glad that I had that opportunity. It's really beautiful. I mean, all of this was playing right into that need, that drive for the experiences, for something new, the adventure that had been building in me over the last couple of years leading up to this opportunity. Man, I mean, it fell right into my wheelhouse, and it was incredible. So I head on up 66, and you get up and you go over the top of this fat pass. There's this really cool thing right before the pass. I saw steps, like rock cut steps going up the side of a mountain. And there was no sign. There was no indicator whatsoever of what was at the top of those steps. Usually you're going to see a little road sign or a historical marker or something that kind of indicates there's a reason these steps go up into nowhere. So I clearly had to stop. And I did. I just took off up those steps. And when I got to the top, I found this really cool little rocked in kind of a water catch, like a basin. And there was a little metal plaque in the side of the rock. I don't remember how it was affixed, but there was a little metal plaque and it just said Schaefer Fishbowl Springs. And there was a spring coming out of the side of the mountain there, just into this little bowl that had been built and constructed at some point. And it was really neat. It was really cool. I ended up Googling it, doing the research, and supposedly there's a million different stories about that fishbowl spring that I could find online, but they all of it essentially say the same thing, which is man working for the WPA back in the 30s, Works Progress Administration, They were building the highway through there. They were building something through there. No, that would be about the right time frame for 66. Regardless, they were building through there, probably 66, and they found this spring, and so they went up there and they built that little bowl to catch the water so that they would have water to drink. The man's name that I guess headed it up or did it was named Schaefer. And anyway, they call it the fish bowl because they put goldfish in the spring because the goldfish ate apparently the algae that would grow within the spring. There were no goldfish there when I was there. That would be a pretty old goldfish, I suppose. But it was really neat. There's little things like that along these, as they say, highways and byways of America, and I'm sure all over the world, wherever you're listening. There's so many little things you would never know are there unless you're paying attention. There's always something close to check out that's really fascinating. Um, so I sat there for a while and I took some, I felt like I got some pretty cool pictures of 66. There's a lot of hairpin curves coming up through that valley. And I got a picture that I still have that I really loved from that particular vantage point because you're quite a bit, maybe 40 or 50 feet above 66 at that point. I sat there for a while, did that, and then moved on. Eventually, I came upon an old service station. It was closed. It was early in the morning. It's the day after Christmas. And I don't know that it may just be a museum now or some kind of a shop, but it was an old service station that so had the Route 66 1930s, 1940s vibe. It was like this rock building structure. It had the old signs, like it was so nostalgic. It was straight out of the old movies. Stopped, took pictures of it. I really wish I hadn't been through so early, or possibly on that day. I would have loved to have stopped in there and talked to the people there, maybe about the history of the site, and possibly bought something. It just the vibe was amazing. I got a really cool picture of that. I remember I ended up editing that in one of my photo editors and putting like a kind of the tainted vintage film stock look to it, the old yellowed film stock, because that's what it looked like. It reminds you of things you've never done. Have you ever had nostalgia for stuff you never truly experienced? You've only really heard about it or seen it on TV or in the movies. And you have this weird nostalgic feeling that you can't explain because you weren't ever actually there, but you feel like you see it and you just feel this nostalgia, like this is the way it used to be. It's like, well, I don't know if that's how it used to be. That's just what I was told. But it's kind of an oddity of the human experience that we can experience things like that. But that's what this felt like. It felt like a complete and total throwback to quote unquote a better time, which as a history nerd and somebody who loves to research, I happen to know there was never a better time. Like I will fight and die on that hill with any of you. Let's go back in history to, I don't know, countless genocides, to countless disasters, to countless plagues. Like, no, we've actually got it better than we've ever had it by a long shot. Like I said, I will fight you over that. And I think it's important, though. The reason I have a stand on that, it sounds silly, but is it's important to remember and appreciate what we do have. We have a lot of problems in this world. 2020 was hot garbage. I don't think anyone's ever going to argue that. But y'all, it was so much better than the worst this world has ever had to throw at us. Like, I'm telling you that I know it's a cliche. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. But y'all, it also gives you perspective when you understand your history. Like we live in a really good time in the overall arc of the human experience and human existence. Things are pretty good. They're not bad right now. Comparatively speaking, it could be far, far worse. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, gosh, how did I even get off on that? But anyway, you get this nostalgia for a different time when things were quote unquote simpler. Yeah, that's how we got there. And it was a really neat experience. But going on from there, going up 66, you end up right before you go into Oatman. There's a place, it's called Sightgrieve Pass. And it was just obvious. It was an obvious to me vista that you could see. I don't even believe there was a sign that said like scenic overlook, but it was clearly very scenic. So I pulled over to look, and I could see, I mean, because you're in the high desert, right? It's flat. Except for this like little mountain that popped up, it was flat. You could see for miles. God knows how far you could see. And it was a beautiful view. But as I was kind of tooling around up there and checking things out, I saw up out of the corner of my eye, I saw like a linear object, something with a right angle, something that stands out in nature, right? Something clearly man-made. And I looked up there and I saw a little cross on the side of the hill. And I was like, "Oh man, is there an old cemetery up there?" So I grabbed my camera, ran up the hill, and in a manner of speaking, yes, there was a cemetery up there, but not what I expected. I expected there to be like an old settler cemetery because I was about to roll into this town of Oatman, which has got tons and tons of abandoned gold mining era artifacts. Apparently, it was one of the second most important gold rushes of the gold rush era happened there right around Oatman, and there's abandoned mine shafts and equipment everywhere. So I just assumed it was an old historic cemetery. But I get up there and all the memorials are like made of wood, and there was like paintings on rocks that oh, I can't even remember what the one said. I took pictures of it. There was one of the little headstones, and this was kind of a touching thing. There was two bottles of beer leaning against that memorial, and one of them was empty, and the other was still sealed. Clearly, one for someone and one for the departed, and it was really interesting. So I had service up there, and I Googled and found out, yeah, actually, it had become kind of a makeshift, almost a scattering ground. Lots of people's ashes were scattered there. I was absolutely standing in a cemetery of sorts. There was no real good, clear, clean line on why that particular location, but the best that could be offered was from that particular overlook, you have a view of three states. You can see Arizona clearly because you're standing in it. And as you look to the north and west, you see Nevada. And you look further directly west and south, you're looking at California. So there's a site of three states there. Um, and apparently it's just such a beautiful location. Somebody buried someone there, and that was that. It kind of caught on from there, and it was really neat. And I need to take a minute and cover. There was something that happened for me there that I think is of importance. I deem it of importance to share with you because as we set up in the last episode, we talked about something that was hard for me to talk about, and that was being in a very small peer group when in a positive feedback cycle. It was a religious group, and there's a larger arc to my story that this plays into, and I learned something there. I got a little bit of my humanity back there. It's like grief's past, and I want to talk about that for a minute. Um, Essentially, there's a lot of danger. I'm going to tread lightly because I respect all people's beliefs, except for people who are jerks about it and like kill people for their beliefs. I don't respect that. I will fight you over that too. But all beliefs on this planet, I think, are beautiful. I think they are extensions of the identities of the particular groups of people in those particular geographical settings in the world and cultures that stretch back sometimes thousands of years. I think they're all beautiful, and I think they all have their place. For a decade, I had been being conditioned to believe that what I was reading and what I was believing was the only right thing, which I don't feel too embarrassed saying that because pretty much everybody who's very devout in a belief system obviously thinks they have it right or they would be in a different belief system, right? I mean, that's kind of standard. But this conditioning really created an odd scenario inside of my own brain where I sort of dissociated the rest of people because I'm a very prove it to me kind of guy. Show me proof, I will believe it. And show me reason. If I can see good reason for something, then it all makes sense to me and I'm cool. I can just roll on. But like I'd been being conditioned for so long to believe like this is the only way and everyone else is screwed, right? That's and unfortunately that's now this little group was a very particular kind of group, but that's a broad ranging sentiment in a lot of beliefs. is we've got it right, everyone else has got it wrong, and they're screwed. If that goes on long enough, it will absolutely rewire your brain. And I had this weird situation where I kind of dissociated. I mentioned in the last episode, I've never hated anyone. I love human beings, but I'd come to believe that everyone else hated me because of my beliefs. And there's a weird dissociation that happens with that where other people kind of become, to me, they became like drones. They're like, okay, I see them there. They're human. They're doing things in this world, but ultimately it's just been beaten into my psyche that they're ultimately doomed. You dissociate from that concept and they just kind of become robots almost. They kind of become drones in the world, and it's hard to reconcile that. And my heart knew better than that. And I think that's in the end, ultimately, the only thing that saved me and was my saving grace is that deep down I've always loved people and I couldn't accept it. The problem was the reason I was there so long, like in my defense, if I can say in my defense, it's like I said, prove it to me. If you can show me the text, if you can show me the reason why, if you can explain it to me and I can't poke holes in it, all right, then I'll go with it. I'm totally open to being wrong about anything. I'm always evolving and adapting. I see no problem with being wrong. That's how we get right and get better. But they could prove it to me. And this particular subset of this one major world religion, they had it as right as anyone I've ever seen. To my logic, the way they could explain the entire text that the belief system was based on from beginning to end, right? It made everything mesh where all the other different sects within this particular belief system, it was just like, oh, well, we see it this way and it's got to be this, so we have to ignore that other stuff, and vice versa. Now, this kind of explained it all, and it made perfect sense, and it was intellectually based. It went into the original languages that it was, it was overly intellectual is what I learned. It was overly intellectual. But therefore, I could study it, I could learn it myself, and I couldn't disprove it, so I had to go with it. That's my defense. In the end, my heart knew something was desperately and deeply wrong. Even though all the intellectual, factual evidence in front of me said one story, my heart knew that it wasn't right. And that's tough, because if you've ever committed yourself to a belief system, or you do now to a certain belief in a certain God or entity or whatever you believe in, to question that is usually a really bad thing, possibly an unforgivable thing. So I was in a situation where I was like, I know I'm questioning this, but dare I even say it aloud? You know what I mean? And finally, I broke over all those traumas that had come together, like we mentioned in the last episode. All those things had come together and created one of the greatest traumas I've ever seen or survived in my own life. And ultimately, at many different times, wanted to not survive it. I was never inclined to end it, but I certainly did not want to survive it sometimes. And it broke me in a way where I didn't care anymore. And that ultimately probably saved my life. If we're being completely honest, it ultimately probably saved my life because I did not care anymore. And it was like, I don't buy this, and I'm not going to buy this anymore. And I don't effing care who likes it or who doesn't. This is it. If it sends me to some straight, never-ending, undying hell, what the hell ever. That can't be any worse than this. So ultimately, it was a good thing that kind of saved me. But there was a process of unwiring all of the conditioning that had occurred in my brain over all this time. And I was having a hard time making people human to me again, which is the weirdest thing because I care so much about people and always have. But it's one of those things, I don't know how to explain it, and I wish that I could, because intellectually I knew they mattered and were people and they weren't drones and robots. And in my heart I knew that, but somehow there was still this dissociation where I couldn't somehow make them real in my perspective. And like I mentioned in the last episode, that moment at the Grand Canyon, that was a little step in the right direction to humanizing people that I had been conditioned to believe ultimately weren't going to be of in the end, big scheme of things, they were kind of a persona non grata. And at this moment, I was up here for whatever reason in this little situation, seeing all these people that would have been of all different beliefs. They would have been from, Christian to New Age spiritual to God knows what to atheist, who had created this growing memorial to people that had passed in their lives that mattered. I saw a bit of that humanity again, that humanity in them, the pain that comes with a loss, and the desire to honor that person and honor their loss. And I connected with that in that moment. And it was a big step for me in that's probably not even a word, but rehumanizing the rest of the world. Something I knew that needed to happen for me, something that I didn't know how to get past. I probably should have just had been seeing a therapist, but, couldn't afford that. As a now divorced single guy trying to pay all of his bills and take care of business. But y'all, I'm being really open with y'all. This is not incredibly easy to talk about, but I hope that it has value. I hope that you see something in it, and maybe, if nothing else, a perspective. Y'all, it's dangerous. The reason I share that story is because it's a big part of my story to get back to the person I wanted to be and the human I want to be and where I was going and my path in this world. But the other side is it's a cautionary tale, and you don't realize this, but it's happening to a lot of us right now, just in the United States of America. It's not just in religious circles, it's also in political circles. It's in a lot of places. And we're never going to get political on this podcast. We are staying away from that. We can't help but be in the spiritual realm a little bit. Anything outside, a lot of people, it becomes their church, becomes their sanctuary. Any belief is respected here. Any belief is welcome to be talked about here. Politics, no. We ain't doing politics. We're not going to ruin something that we might have going here that's good with politics. But I say it as a cautionary tale. We have political cults right now. Absolutely do. Like, you can go look up the FBI. There's an analytical tool you can basically look up, and there's like 9 flags, and you've only got to hit like 4 of those flags for something to be considered a cult by the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I forget the right numbers, but it's something like that. God, we got political cults that are dinging all 10, all 9 or 10 flags. Like, blind belief without question and going against what you know in your heart is incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly destructive. It's incredibly hurtful. It can be. Let me disclaim that it can be. But blind belief without questioning it can create some very destructive situations, and some very brainwashed people. And you can end up someone like me, who pretty fairly intelligent guy, very open-hearted, loving guy, loves everyone in the world, can be conditioned to believe that somehow all those people in the world are against him and hate him because of his belief system, and be completely without anchor and lost and floundering in the sea of I don't understand this world anymore. That's absolutely possible. I've seen it happen to lots of people. I've done lots of research in the aftermath of my particular situation. And maybe it's one reason I feel confident enough to share it, is because I've seen lots of other people share their stories. I was like, this is one of the most intelligent people I've ever seen, and they were pulled into a situation similar to what I was. And I found so much value and validation and kind of release of a guilt in hearing their stories that I guess that's part of the motivation in sharing mine here too, as it can happen to a lot of people. But anyway, I was able to gain another foothold up in my path forward back to where I needed to be there at Sightgrieve Pass, that little memorial situation they had going on there, because somehow, for some reason, in that moment, that little situation helped me regain some of my vision to see humanity for what it is, that everyone matters regardless of their belief, that everyone matters. That's something, probably the biggest thing I took out of everything that happened to me in my situation and came out at the other side, and where I've been for the last couple of years, is everyone matters. everyone has value on some level. Like, yeah, I believe that we have bearing on that value. I mean, if you're an Adolf Hitler or a Mussolini or a whoever, yeah, you're going to have, at least in my book, very little value. But we intrinsically, because we were born and found ourselves on this planet against our will, we did not choose this, unless you believe, subscribe to certain beliefs. We didn't choose this. We just ended up here. We have value just because of that. Because we are born and alive and living human beings, we have value. And I started to see that again on my adventure, on my trip, something that I had been desperately clawing for. And I think that's a lesson for all of us, that we need to understand everyone has value. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's been damaged. Everyone's been through something. We need to be kind to each other. We need to try to help each other. We need to be more understanding and less confrontational. That's one of our big problems in the world. We're very confrontational these days. Um, but this was a big moment for me and something I really needed to happen. And there I've shared a whole lot more uncomfortable stuff about myself. Um, but it'll be all right. I will make it through that. We will survive it. And hopefully it is something valuable to someone out there. Um, so let's move on from there. Now that we've had a major epiphany in my life, let's go from there on and go on into Oatman, which was super cool. That's the beauty of this, guys. Okay? Now I had a golden opportunity presented to me, right? Not everyone gets that opportunity in my life. I've never gotten opportunities like that until this came along. But there is a proof of concept there. You can go out and travel and see and do some really cool stuff and not be a rich person and not have lots of money. That's what I do with my time now on my weekends, man. For a tank of gas or two, possibly at a stretch, and a whole weekend before you can go out and have a great time and see some awesome stuff. If you live anywhere in Arizona, within a few hours of Oatman, you could go out and explore all these things. Just the way that I go out and explore the Ozarks and all these beautiful waterfalls we have here for a tank of gas. I have a tank of gas. Don't even factor in food into your cost, guys, because you're going to eat if you set your butt at home. Like, there's no reason to even factor it unless you're one of those people that has to have like a $50 meal at the local finest restaurant. Eat sandwiches, whatever. You can go out and do it. Like, that's one of the biggest hindrances I hear from people is they're like, well, I don't have the money or I don't have the time. Certainly you can squeeze a day a month, just one day a month out of your schedule and out of your life for something to go take a little adventure. And $50, $30, a half tank gas. Get on Google. One day I'll go over my system for finding things to check out. Like, I have a whole system in place to find places of interest to go and explore. And I'll do that someday. But my point is I'm seeing all these amazing things, and for me, it's a grand adventure because I've never been through New Mexico and Arizona. But if you live in New Mexico and Arizona, you live there. You're in that adventure. Just like I in Arkansas, I'm in my own with the Mulberry River, the Buffalo River, the Ozark hiking trails, the Ozark Highland Trail. There's always something close to you can go do. Um, but as I'm going through here, I'm seeing all these abandoned relics, and I love history. I'm a hardcore nerd about abandoned things. I'm follow those Insta hashtags, abandoned and all that. I love abandoned things. I love history, especially like industrial revolution age forward. Like, it's really what turned us into where we are today. Um, and this stuff's everywhere. It's all over the hillsides and the mountainsides as you're going through this pass. It's everywhere. And it's super cool. I didn't get out and really check out a lot of it because it all looked like it was probably on private property. And I'm from out of state. I am on a little bit of a schedule and I still want to risk it. But it's very cool. I highly recommend making this trip someday. That little 30 something mile stretch from Kingman through Oatman down to Needles on Old Highway 66, Old Route 66. So I roll into Oatman, and it's early. It's too early. Nothing's open. They have a small little downtown Main Street type of thing. I kid you not, guys. There was people outside sweeping like donkey poop off the road, off the sidewalks. Like, that was Oatman. How cool is that? I mean, I think a really snotty, uppity, condescending word to use here would be how quaint. But It was super cool. I didn't stop because there was nothing open, but I did. I just cruised through there real slow, and there's horses and hitching post for horses and donkeys in the street, and there's literally guys with push brooms, shop brooms, sweeping donkey poop out of the streets in this little town. That's on a return list for me. Someday I'm back out that way. I'm going into that town when COVID hasn't shut the world down, when Christmas hasn't shut the world down, and not at 6:30 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning. I'm going back to that town someday to check it out. It was that cool. Um, and the whole trip, the whole 30 miles through there is just absolutely amazing. You go through, it's the desert Southwest. There's cactus. There's all this different flora that you don't see in your wherever you're native to unless you're from the desert Southwest. And these mesas, I mean, I wasted too much time there. I about got myself in trouble trying to make it to San Francisco in time, because I just kept getting sidetracked by all this awesome stuff. When you come back out of the mountain and you're about to reconnect with 40 down around Needles, you go under the old, well, it's current now, BNSF Railway, but you go under an overpass and it's still got the old Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe logo on the side of it, the old Super Chief. You know, think about the postcards and the things from the 1940s and 50s of the passenger trains and the Santa Fe Railway going through the desert, going through Southern California. Like, yeah, I was there and in it. And I wonder how many times you may have driven right through there, just booked it right down 40 and never noticed any of these things. Like, slow down and look around. That's kind of what I'm a huge proponent of now. Like, I was there standing in one of those old postcards that were in my grandma's box of keepsakes. You know what I mean? Like, that was just so fascinatingly cool. And from there, you get on, you head on into California. When you go into California, I'm heading into California, and there's this giant checkpoint. This the only place I've ever checked past a checkpoint like this was down by the Mexican border when I was filming for a TV show we used to shoot, and we shot in Bracketville, Texas, right by the Mexican border. And you go through these checkpoints, and they have the dogs, and they have the mirrors, and all that. And I was like, in my brain, I couldn't function. I couldn't make it make sense. I was like, what's happening here? This isn't. I'm not moving, going into a foreign nation, right? Well, as it turns out, you kind of are, but we'll talk about that more later. But it wasn't that. It was literally a checkpoint for um, agricultural products. They asked me, like, do you have any fruit? Do you have any vegetables? Do you have any plants? I forget how they worded it, but I was like, why in the hell would I have any of those things? Um, I mean, I'm cruising along in my little Nissan Xterra, and the whole thing's packed out with bags and clothing. But yeah, it was a checkpoint for plant life. But I get into California, and guys, it's beautiful. Once you get past, say, Bakersfield, and you start to head north, it becomes a whole different world. You get into an agricultural area. Forget the interstate number, but it's a wide open freeway that just shoots from basically Bakersfield all the way to San Fran and points further north. Um, and it's beautiful. There's these giant green, dramatically steep, rolling hills everywhere. Now, some of them are covered in windmills in a wind farm. And in a way, they're eyesores, but in another way, they kind of have a picturesque quality about them as well. Then, this is one of the things I figured out about California. No matter where you are in California and what time of day, it's basically always golden hour. In film and video and in photography, we have what we call magic hour or golden hour. And it's that last hour to hour and a half before sunset where the sun's hitting the atmosphere at just the right angle and it creates this giant golden glow, right? And it makes pictures easy to take. It makes everything beautiful. California kind of always looks like that. And I'm not sure why. I'm going to assume maybe it has something to do with the humidity and the ocean being so close. Something like that. It's got to be some kind of a physiological phenomenon. It has to be. Um, but it's always beautiful, most of it. Yeah, I mean, in the southern part, it's still mostly desert. But as you start to go north, it becomes this lush greenery with these dramatically steep, gorgeous mountains everywhere. And I can't even begin to impress upon you just how kind of in awe I was of its natural beauty. And the further north you go, the more beautiful it gets and the more dramatic the mountains and the valley get. And I was also just blown away by the amount of agriculture. Like growing up in the central United States, and maybe this is true of everywhere else in the world, but you just assume California is Los Angeles. Like it just all is Los Angeles. That's not even remotely true. Los Angeles is Los Angeles. San Francisco is San Francisco. And San Francisco is essentially San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, Santa Cruz. It's pretty much all those things. Sacramento's almost, they're all pretty much just a big giant wad. It's the big population center. Outside of that, the rest of the state is ag. It's all agriculture. It's all mountains. It's all hiking. It's all beautiful. And it's also highly conservative. It's kind of surprising. Clearly, the politics of California are ran from two major population centers because, like, everyone else in the state is just like being at home in Arkansas. Guys, I was sitting in Oakland one night in traffic, and this guy goes by me in a giant, jacked up, I don't remember, it's a F-350 or something, but a giant, jacked up four-wheel drive truck with the the silver the chrome bull testicles hanging from the back and a giant AR-15 across the back glass and letters saying, "Come and take it," in Oakland, California. And I looked at that and I looked at I had coworkers with me at that point. That was a different trip while we were there working and we had gone up the coast. And I looked at them and I was like, did we just like magically transport back to Arkansas? Because that's not out of place. Here in Arkansas, lots of people are compensating for something. But there, it shocked me. But then I came to find out that's the whole state. The whole entire state is really conservative except for two major populated areas. It's very interesting. It's interesting sociologically speaking, socially speaking. But it's just such a beautiful place. Everything's beautiful. Now, they don't tell you about the smell. It stinks. And interestingly enough, as long as I was there, no one ever knew what the smell was. I asked, I don't know how many people I asked, what the heck is this smell? And it's not like Amarillo smell. It's a whole different kind of funky. And I was like, what is this smell? And no one ever had an answer. Somebody finally posited they had an idea that, like, well, maybe I think that that's how we fertilize the fields. I think these farmers bring over like these, kelp or seaweed or something that washes up on the beaches. Maybe they harvest it somehow and they put it out on their fields. Yeah, that's reasonable. I kind of just went with that, but nobody actually ever knew the answer to my question, which I guess that's preferable to what we do in Arkansas, which is spread chicken crap all over our fields for fertilizer, which really stinks. But yeah, California's very ag centered. The whole state's very agricultural and smells a lot, but it's still absolutely beautiful. Everything's green. I mean, everything's green. Guys, I would drive into work over an area from where we stayed in a hotel in Morgan Hill, California, just south of San Fran, go over Hecker Pass on my way down to Watsonville to the terminal every morning. And I went through a redwood forest going over the pass. Every morning I got to drive in a redwood forest. And then when I got to the valley on the other side of the pass and off the mountain, I literally drove through, what is it, Driscoll's? I think Driscoll's, but one of the major companies that makes like strawberry jellies and jams and all these different flavored jams, they have their fields there. You drive right through like their fields. And what's really interesting about that is they didn't have giant combines harvesting all of these fruits and these little, little fruits and berries. They had individual human beings walking through the fields with baskets and whatever kind of containers they had picking these. I mean, it kind of made you feel like you'd gone back in time. But it was just gorgeous. Everything was gorgeous. And they have this thing. They have something in California. They have mountain cows. I call them mountain cows. They have mountain cows in California. They are these shaggy, hairy, yak-looking cows up on the sides of these giant hills. And like, let me be clear about these hills. Like, they are dramatically inclined. I mean, I don't know what the degree of the angle of that is, but they're dramatically inclined. I'm like, that's mountain goat territory, but those are cows. Really hairy, shaggy cows. They're really cute. Never understood the mountain cows. But again, California has a lot of ag. I'm 10 minutes south of San Francisco, delivering in the like 19th most affluent community in the United States, literally in Silicon Valley. I delivered to IBM's world headquarters, y'all. For real. Man, you talk about security. But everyone there was basically the people who built the internet and the computer world, and what I'm making this podcast and YouTube video on right now into this camera. This is the people that built that and laid that groundwork. And they all retired to Morgan Hill, California. It's a beautiful place. But literally, you're in a neighborhood with all of these houses that the cheapest one we could find on the market was $1 million. It was $995,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 900 square foot house. $1 million in this community. Cheapest one we could find, just out of sheer curiosity, obviously. But you're in these little neighborhoods with these houses that are $1 million a piece, and right behind them, on the other side of the cul-de-sac, is literally mountain cows on the side of a mountain. I can't explain it. It was really cool, but California has mountain cows. It really is its own kind of foreign country. Like, honestly, California could be its own continent. It's a strange place. I mean, obviously, if it was disconnected and off the coast to be a continent, but it's kind of small too, I guess. It'd be more like a giant island, wouldn't it? No, that's England. But anyway, it's very interesting. California's a beautiful place, but I was soaking all of this in. I was on the journey of a lifetime, and it was about to get real. I was about to have to go to work, right? But for this 3 days, 2.5 day adventure to get there, it was a great experience, and it was something I needed. I was healing, I was building, I was learning, I was growing, I was getting back to where I needed to be. We've already covered two kind of major instances of me being able to put some humanity back in the rest of the world. For me personally, within myself, which was a major building block to me getting to here right now, making this podcast, because the whole idea that this podcast is predicated on is we're all the same. We're all one people. And we need to be together on everything. We need to share. We need to be helpful to each other. We need unity in the world. Like, I love people, and I want people to see their own value. Like, I didn't get to see my own value for the first 38 years of my life until a lot of these things started to come to pass, starting really with that big trip. Um, and when I realized that, it became such a big deal to me. It's like, I want everyone to know. Like, you see people hurting, going through stuff, struggling. We're all struggling every day with something, just trying to survive in this world, just trying to pay bills. We're all struggling. Um, and I just want people to know, man, you matter. Like, you totally, completely matter. If to no one else in the world, just to yourself. You should matter just to yourself. We all matter. We all have value. And the way that I can't, I don't, I can't come up with the right word for it, but the way that we use that value, the way we harvest that value, is by investing it in other people. See your own value and share yourself with someone else. Try to make someone else's world just a little bit better. And that's the whole idea this podcast is predicated on, is let's share ourselves. Let's share our stories. Let's build a community of, because it's all of us out there in the wilderness, on the backcountry trails, on the sides of the mountains, on the rivers, in the oceans. We all seem to have at least one major thing in common, and that's our love of nature. And it is one common ground that we can have. And through that, we learn, we gain wisdom, we gain understanding in our spiritual journeys, in our emotional, mental journeys, just in our path, no matter what your spirituality or anything else is. In the end, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And it doesn't matter what we believe, because whatever happens after we die, none of us are going to know until we get there anyway. This is like Eastern concept. This is a very Eastern philosophical concept. The future is a figment of our imagination. The past is just a memory. The only reality is the moment now. Right now, we're alive. We're living, and this is what really, really matters in the end. How we take care of business here, in the here and now, and how we take care of each other. That's my opinion. It's all about what we do for each other and how we try to build this world into a better place. That's what I believe. That's what my morality has come to be. Good is taking care of people. Bad is hurting people. Anything in between, it's just amoral. Whatever, move on. Yeah, so I guess that's really kind of a good place. That's really a pretty good wrap up of that episode. That covers day two of my trip, wrapping up my trip out. We got a little life lesson from Justin in there as he embarrassed himself and told on himself more than he ever wanted to. Um, that I think that's what we're after here. Sharing the stories, man. That's the groundwork, and it's what I did tonight and what we'll keep doing in every episode. I hope to hear from you guys soon. Make sure and send those stories in mywaywardstory@gmail.com. Guys, like, get me the stories so we can start putting them into the podcast. Don't forget, go to the Patreon if you want to support me in any way, shape, or form. Go to Reddit, go to Facebook, go to waywardstories.com, and you can find the private communities where we can all be in a nice safe space where we can all talk and share, have a good time without being trolled by people, because I will flame you in a minute if you come in and troll my people. Like, I will burn down the whole thing. Forget about it, you're gone. um but yeah, check out everything there. You can get to my Instagram. I'm always posting stuff on Instagram. We've got all kinds of stuff going on as we're trying to build this concept, this platform, this idea, hopefully build this community. And I hope you guys will join me and help me to do that. Please rate and subscribe. If you do want to help, if you want to keep this stuff coming out wherever you're listening to this, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, doesn't matter, iHeartRadio, please rate and subscribe, because that's what drives rankings. That's what puts us in front of people's eyeballs. That's what gets us more listeners, and listeners are ultimately what's going to keep this thing being produced. So if you can do that, I would greatly appreciate it and be forever indebted to you. Um, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week. Next week we'll cover some more. We're probably going to get into some of the stories, some of the things. Man, I went on more adventures than you can wrap your brain around in 2.5 months on the Central California coast. I'm going to give you some insider tips of how to go out there and have a good time. Those are going to be fun episodes. Those are going to be fun stories to tell. Yeah, that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Appreciate you guys checking it out. I'm glad to have you here. And until next week, like, remember, be good to each other.
We here at Studio 119 would like to remind all of you out there listening, wherever you might be, that though the hill might be steep and the trail be rocky, the mountaintop awaits. Carry on.